David Edward and Mary McDonald discuss Mary's book, Alone at the End of the World.
Mary, how are you?
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm good. I usually open these by saying, I hear you've written a book, but that would be a little passé of me to say, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I've written 13 novels, and I have a couple short stories.
13 novels, and you've been doing this, and I'm trying to do the calculations in my head, but for at least a decade, if not a little longer, right?
Yeah. I started my first book, started writing it at the beginning of 2009, finished it in the fall, and I've just been writing continually ever since.
And then you have a couple different book series out, don't you?
Yeah, I have my first one was a thriller series with a little bit of a paranormal twist. And then I did a little spin-off on that one. So it kind of followed the same thing. And then I did a post-apocalyptic series with a pandemic. I started that in 2016, and it was a 3-book series. So I wrapped that up. And then I decided I really liked being in that world. I don't know why, because now we're in a real pandemic. But at the time, it sounded like a good idea. So I started like a companion series with it.
Wow.
It takes place in the same world with the same disease, but all new characters. So, we're seeing their view of what happened to them
Right.
in this pandemic that wipes out like 95% of the world
Wow.
population. So
that would mean in your new book series, there are about as many people left on the planet as today have read one of your books.
yeah, maybe that's about it. Yep.
Because you have had over the 10 years or a little bit more, 300 or 350,000 books, right? Delivered to people.
Yeah, sold. And then I've given away, oh gosh, close to 1 million books.
Wow. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we're going to talk about one of your specific books, but what I really want to do is start to dig into your writing process, because the goal of our conversation is for folks out there who are interested in becoming a writer or who are writers and looking to improve their process to listen to successful people. And I think you might be one of the most successful people I've talked to yet when it comes to books out there. You certainly surpassed me, which is not much of a feat.
You've got quite a few books out there too, and some pretty good sales. So.
But my readership is nowhere near your readership. So we're going to dig into one of your books now, right? We're going to dig into a book called Alone at the End of the World.
Right. That's the first book in the companion series of the pandemic.
Okay. And it's been out now for 3 years?
2 years. Almost 2 years exactly, I think. It was in April, I think, of 2020. So right at the time the pandemic started. I planned this as an anniversary addition to your book, so you can see how much time I spend, and effort it goes into all of these things. So why don't you walk us through, you explain kind of what the book's about, and why don't you talk about what inspired you to kind of take on this topic long before it was any kind of reality for us, and then we'll kind of walk into what your process looks like as you decide to write a new book, all the way through getting it out there so people can read it. Okay, so it kind of goes back to the first series. I wanted to write something post-apocalyptic because I really like reading it. 1 Second After was one of my favorite books. I mean, I read it in like 20 hours. It was so good.
Yeah.
And, I read others after that. And I really wanted to try it myself, but I didn't feel comfortable writing something with a nuclear bomb or, I didn't want something that would just wipe out technology because it would just, I wanted something that would wipe out a lot of people too. I guess maybe I'm sadistic. I don't know, but I wanted something like that. I guess I didn't want my characters going around having to kill people and everything to survive. I wanted them to just be like suddenly in this world where they had to get by without, because technology would still be gone for the most part because there wouldn't be anyone left alive to run anything. So I did that with the first series, and then I still liked the idea, and I figured there were still some survivors out there, and I could tell their story. It would be a little bit different because they're, different people and how they're reacting. And so I started the next series. I decided to call it Simpatico Syndrome World, and the other one was a Simpatico Syndrome series. So I figured this encompasses a whole world. Because they may meet up again, they may meet up at some point.
Sure.
in this series, where they may meet the survivors of the first series. So that was kind of my idea.
For those of us like me that had to go look up the word simpatico, why don't you give us some insight into why you chose that particular word?
Okay, so I did research on different diseases, and I'm a respiratory therapist in my day job.
Yeah.
So that was another reason I picked the pandemic. I figured I could do the medical part. So, but I still did research because, don't know that much about diseases that kill everybody. And I wanted something that would be super contagious, like the measles or something that would be airborne, but would also make people, I didn't want them, because what happens when someone gets really sick and dies from a disease like Ebola is they get so sick that they take to their bed, and that kind of limits how many people can get the illness. I mean, which is a good thing for us, but not for my story. So I wanted to create a disease that would make people more friendly, outgoing, and they, in the beginning stages of the disease.
Interesting.
And also there's I think it's a parasite I looked up that cats get, the toxoplasmosis that cats get. When you change litter boxes, like pregnant women aren't supposed to change a litter box because of this. I want to say it's a parasite, or I can't remember exactly what it is.
I believe
but
you. Yeah, I don't know.
I had read a study where they found out that that parasite wants to get into it wants to get into cats, like lions and tigers and stuff. And the way it does that is it makes primates who contract this disease, like chimps and gorillas and stuff, less afraid of cats.
Interesting.
So they're more likely to approach like a lion, or not react as strongly with that natural fear of a cat or lion. So they're more likely, to be eaten by a lion, and therefore get into the lion and be in the lion's brain. So, because I did a study with some, I think it was orangutans, that some were infected with this disease and some weren't, and then they were put into enclosures next to cats, like lions. And the ones that weren't infected were terrified, and they were like running away from these. And the other ones are kind of going up to the fence like, oh, what's that over there? So
that's brilliant.
So that was my idea, is I'm going to make these people so that they're really friendly and they want to gather in groups and spread their disease everywhere, because that's what the disease wants. It wants to be spread to all the people.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my take.
Wow. I can see why your books are doing so good. I mean, that is incredibly not only clever and interesting take, but it's also, you basically turned the genre on its head, right? I mean, now the interactions and the stories are almost the opposite of every other book in that genre.
Yeah. They're not not falling over, and they're not zombies, because they don't come back to life.
Right.
Once people die, they die. But there's a little bit of a zombie-like behavior in the beginning of some of the, not so much Alone at the End of the World, but in the series overall, where, because they're just so sociable, but then they start drinking, and, you get the behaviors associated with drinking and doing drugs and all that stuff.
Yeah. Good times. Yeah. So now, I mean, you kind of glossed over it, but I think you get a little more credit than you give yourself. You have a real job, and you've managed to yet still write all these books.
Yeah, I've written 2 during the pandemic. I'm not a fast writer like you are. I wish I could.
Well, your stuff's better. That's why.
and then I started writing a different book last summer for Christmas, but I didn't finish it. And so now I'm starting on the 3rd book. I just needed a little bit of a break from writing pandemic stuff.
Sure.
Plus, we were super busy in the hospital. I mean, it was crazy from November all the way through maybe mid-February.
Oh, sure. I can only imagine, and
I'm only part-time, but I would be there like 12 hours, and you just come home. There's no way you can write. And the next day you're just still kind of like,
Right. Well, tell you what, take us into a day in your writing life. So, you were working on, this book or any of the books, and what do you do? How do you start? What does the process look like? Do you outline? Do you write on a word count? All that kind of stuff.
I don't really outline, but at the beginning of each book, I do take like a notebook and I write down kind of plot points I want to hit. And then I put it away unless I get stuck, and then I'll pull it out and kind of write a little bit more. But I'll put it away. Usually by the end of the book, I open it back up and go through, and I've hit almost every one of them.
Okay.
So it's not like a definite outline that I hit or I write, and every chapter has to have this. And I'm just not that organized. I'm more of a, pantser.
Yeah, that's what they call
So,
it. I hate the term, but I know, yeah, that's what it is. I mean, so, okay.
yeah, I'll be writing and like, oh, maybe I should do this. I mean, I just got an idea the other day for something that I was kind of stuck and trying to think how to put something else in this story. And then just in research usually helps me the most. I go to look at something maybe on YouTube.
Mhm.
And then it's like, oh, well, that really happened. I can kind of incorporate that into my story.
Right.
And
Right.
that kind of solves one of those problems.
So do you have a special place you write? Do you, when you sit down, do you, want to bang out 2 pages, 5 pages, 10 pages? What does that look like?
Well, I'm at my desk now. Sometimes I'm in my recliner, but usually I'm at my desk. And I move that around the house. It's in the front room, now it's in the living room, or in the family room. But what my main process is, I have a writing buddy, and we have been writing buddies since, 2007. We would write fan fiction together. Now she writes her books and I write my books.
Wow, nice.
She just published a book too.
Good for her. We got to get her on the show.
Yeah, I'll give you her name later. And so what we do is we get together online. She lives in Texas. I live here in Wisconsin. And we will set a time for maybe an hour or so.
Okay.
And we'll write as much as we can. And what makes it different from other writing sprints that other people do and I've always heard from, is they do the writing sprint and they're done. But we exchange what we write. And that instant feedback of what I've written that day really, and plus then she might give, I might say, well, I had a problem with this. I'm not sure what to do next. And we kind of talk it out with, each of our stories.
Wow. I mean, that's very unique. I've never heard anyone doing that before. That's amazing.
Yeah, we've been doing it forever. And that's been my main thing. We'll get together and we'll do our writing sprints. And she always beats me every time. She'll knock out 2,500 words in like an hour and 10 minutes. And I'm like happy I got 1,000.
Wow. Yeah,
so she's a really fast typer.
So how long does it take from the time you start to write a book to the time it's finished? What is that, 6 months, a year?
It's generally just like a baby. It's like 9 months usually. So yeah, pretty much. But there was one time I wrote one in 6 months. I was really proud of myself.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
That is that the buddy writing process. Do you ever get stuck? Does that help you with like writer's block and stuff, or is writer's block?
Sure, because we'll be in instant messages and just talking to each other back and forth. I'm not really sure what to do here, and then she's read it, so she can give me ideas. It's not like she's just throwing stuff out, out of thin air. Right. So, and I do the same for her with her stories. So,
well, let's talk about, I haven't had a chance. You are the first person that has a completed series of books and has written this many books. In addition to how do you write books, how do you plan your series out? How do you know, is it going to be 2 books, 5 books, 10 books? How do you know when it's done? How does that all work?
Well, my first series, I didn't really plan it out at all. I didn't even plan to have a series. I wrote one book and that was going to be it. But then people were like, well, we want another, we want a second book. And
yeah.
Excuse me. So then I just kept thinking of different things this character trouble he could get into. So, but with the pandemic one, I pretty much was like, I planned it out, locations kind of. Like the first one was getting them all into one place. And that's how Alone at the End of the World is also. I have 3 storylines. I have basically 3 main characters.
Yep.
One is kind of more of the main character, but the other 2 are very strong supporting characters. And in this case, they didn't know each other in Alone at the End of the World. One, they did. They were actually like kind of relations, but they didn't, hadn't seen each other in years. But the other one was a total stranger, and somehow their paths converge, and they become part of the story together. They have so they continue on with the next book. So then that, like the second book, they're in this one location and, calamities happen, things are happening, they're trying to survive. And then in the last book, basically they've decided to move somewhere else that they think might be a better situation for them. And then it's the journey there.
Now let's talk and I secretly know the answer to this because we've spoken before, but your covers. My understanding is you have an entire agency, a floor full of people at the hospital that spend months working on a cover for you. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I wish. I wish. No, it's me. I do all my covers.
Really? That's great.
I enjoy doing them. Yeah, no, hardly anyone at work knows I even write books. My department does. I think most of them do.
Okay.
But like the nurses and doctors and stuff, it's a couple of them do. So I don't tell
but
anybody.
but you do your own covers, which you
I do my own covers. I use free programs for the most part.
Wow. Yeah.
So pretty much anyone can do that. I do go and I study the covers of the genre that I'm making one in. I look at what's selling for, post-apocalyptic, and look at the trends, like we were talking about how the overexposed covers, and also kind of like there was one series, an author, and she's got a lot of green, and sunsets, and I really like that, and I kind of sort of emulated that. I put like one of my characters on the cover, or someone supposed to be the character.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, I think this is really important, Mary, because you're honestly as successful as most of us could ever hope to be. And you kind of just said you still go out and study the genre, you look at the other books out there, and you very much keep your eye on the covers, but also that that the stories and what's going on in where you write, which I think is interesting.
That's what with Alone at the End of the World, I wanted to do like a font or a text heavy cover, because that's kind of popular now, not even just in post-apocalyptic, but in your general thrillers and your a lot of the bestsellers have a lot of this kind of cool looking text on the front. And so I wanted to do that, and that's why I have like big words and little words and kind of stacked and everything. That was fun to play around with.
Yeah, I'm looking at. I have your cover over here on one of my monitors. I keep looking at it. So we're going to run out of time. This conversation's gone really fast, but there's a couple other things I want to make sure we touch on. I want to ask you this. This is a dual question. So the general question is, when your book came out, what surprised you most about its reception? But I want to ask you for two books. For whatever the first book was that kind of really caught on. What surprised you the most about that and the feedback you got? And now every time you release a book, is there anything that still surprises you about how it's received?
I'm always surprised that people like it. I'm just happy. Like, by the time you're done reading it and writing it and editing it, you're just sick of it. And you're like, no one's going to like this. It's horrible. And you put it out there and you're like, you're cringing, and then you're waiting for feedback.
Yeah. So
I'm always surprised that, people seem to like them. As far as my first successful book, is that what you're talking about? Well,
yeah, just when all of a sudden you started doing this, and then you realized that it was gonna work.
My very first book is called No Good Deed, and I wrote that. That one I sent to agents and everything. Didn't get much interest, and then I self-published it. And a year later, this was when free books were still kind of a new thing, because it was 2011. Right. I kind of accidentally made it free. There was no Kindle Unlimited, so you couldn't do it on purpose. You had to like price match it. Right. So anyway, it ended up free one morning, and it was like, I don't know, I gave away like 35,000 in a weekend. Wow. It was, maybe it was even a couple days. It was crazy. Wow. And I was worried that was gonna, that was bad. So I did what I needed to do to make it not free anymore. But it takes a few days for that to go through the channels at that time. I think I had it free on something on Smashwords. And so took a few days for Amazon to catch up, and it's no longer free, so they made it paid again. But when it hit paid again, it started selling like hotcakes. Wow. And I remember my daughter and I were sitting there, and she was like 10 or 11 years old, sitting on the chair, and we just kept refreshing the Kindle thing. And it'd be like 10 more, and like 10 seconds later, oh my God, 20 more sold. That's awesome. So it hit number 15 in the Amazon store, in the Kindle store. Wow. That day. I think I sold like 2,000 copies that day. And then I had book 2 out by then. So that made it like 200 or something. Right. But that one was full price, and No Good Deed was 99 cents. That's probably another reason it sold so well. Right. It's amazing. Well,
Congratulations on that. That's good. I refresh that page often, but I always just feel sorrow and shame when.
Well, that was, I've never had a day like that since then. It was so much fun.
All right. Well, Mary, what advice would you have? Let's say that someone's watching this video and they're writing a book, or they want to write a book, or maybe they've written a book, but they're looking to improve their writing process. What advice would you have for someone?
Well, if they can find another writing buddy like I have, that would be awesome.
That's good advice. Yeah.
That's what works for me. But NaNoWriMo has like Discord groups. My daughter's in one. She just told me yesterday she was writing a story and wrote 3,000 words in it. And, would kind of doing like a buddy writing system, but they don't read each other's stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, I think having someone else there as a support system really helps.
Okay.
It does for me.
Yep. Wow. Okay. I think that's good advice. And that this is the first time I've come across that. So I think that is a wonderful addition to the, tips that we're trying to build here. Well, Mary, look, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. And I'm going to secretly be your biggest fan going forward and follow your books and stuff. So you'll always sell one more than you think maybe you were going to. That'll be me.
Thank you.
Okay. And I'll follow up with you. Maybe in 6 months, we'll do this again. We'll check in with where you are and on your rigorous publishing schedule. And
hopefully I have, at least a couple more books out by then.
I'm sure you will. And as I mentioned to you, you're one of the only people that understands when I say, your best book is your next book.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Right. And that's the modus operandi here. So, all right, Mary, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button